Set 6 is finally here, and I am super excited to show you guys my brand new Whole New World Sapphire Steel deck list. I think Sapphire and Steel got so many upgrades, some awesome new tools, even enough to make a brand new archetype with some crazy item decks that I've been seeing going around. Overall, the consistency and the offense and defense of what was lacking last set from Sapphire and Steel just got way better. At the end of the video, I'll be going over some mulligans, so don't worry if you want to pick up the deck and not sure where to start off. This is not only like a deck profile, but also a guide to some extent. I'll be going over some tips, some awesome lines of plays that you can do, and also I'll have some different cards that, just in case you don't want to run in my build, and some cards that you've been testing out, I'll tell you guys the flex spots just in case you wanted to move some cards around. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I hope you guys enjoy the video. So to start off the deck, we're going to go pretty much on curve, and that's going to be 3 Mr. Smees. So Mr. Smee stays in the deck. The reason why we cut 1 Smee down compared to 4 is because now we're playing 4 Jim Hawkins. Now, what makes this card so good and why are we playing 4 of it? Well, the Jim Hawkins is a 2-drop, and his effect is every time you put a card into your inkwell, he gets Challenger +2. Now, this effect stacks, so that means you can ink, activate your second ramp for turn, and now Jim Hawkins is swinging 4 for 4. That stat line is crazy for a 2-drop. He can pretty much knock out Daisies, Sisu's, 2-drop Ursulas, pretty much anything that is a early aggro defensive threat. He just clears that so well, and because we're playing ramp cards and we can ramp twice, we're gonna maximize that so we can get his effect to go off. I prioritize the Jim Hawkins over the 4 Smee just because Smee being that 3/3 stat line, but Smee's still too good to not run. The 2 questing with Smee is just really strong. And again, pairing with Jim, you can take out a castle swinging for 7. Worst case scenario, you can only ink once. The small Jim Hawkins is going to swing for 2. And that 4 defense line is really strong. You just have to be careful, though, against Ruby decks on the draw because they can brawl your Jim Hawkins. So you make sure in that scenario you want to play the Smee, which is also why another reason why I'm playing the Smee still is for those Ruby decks, right? If they're able to brawl Jim Hawkins, I want to be able to still threaten the board. So a card like Smee will just prevent that from happening, and also to help not trigger Flynn's. There's still a lot of early game pressure from a lot of different type of decks, so I think these 7 cards to combat that fits Sapphire and Steel really well. There's also another big reason why we're running this Jim Hawkins, but we'll get into that later. For our 3-drop slot, we're playing 2 Pete. So Pete is still a very strong card, being able to prevent actions from being played. So in the mirror match against Steel Song, and even to counter Ruby decks with Be Prepared, this card really puts a stop to your opponent's answers to your board. Honestly, Pete is going to be one of those cards in the deck that you can play a 4 or up to 3 copies of it. I'm personally on 2 right now. I just felt like with the new early game pressure that we have, I've been wanting to see Pete more later in the game, and at 3-4 copies I just kept seeing him early and he was getting inked. So I think 2 right now is nice, but I could see this spot changing. Again, Pete is really just to checkmate your board and your opponent when you have a wide enough field, and as soon as you play Pete, that really stuns your opponent. And again, even against decks like Emerald Steel on curve, when they play 3-drop Ursula, you can play Pete and stop them for a turn. So Pete is just really strong because pretty much in every deck, everyone's playing action cards. For our 4-drop slot, we're still playing the good old Hiram, best card in the deck. You can draw 2 cards when you quest and on play by destroying an item. I don't think this card needs pretty much any more explanation, but yeah, this card's insane. This card's still not going anywhere. Main draw engine for pretty much any Sapphire and Steel deck. We got 2 Plutos. So Pluto is a 4-drop inkable that can quest for 1. He has bodyguard and his stat line is 1/5, but his effect is as long as he has no damage, he actually gets +4 attack. Meaning on play, he is a 5/5 stat line, which is insane. Last set, we only had Grandma Tala as our other 4-drop, but the 3/3 stat line just didn't do enough for me personally to make the cut in the 4-drop slot. And in those turns where you get to ramp and then you're on turn 4 and you don't have Fishbone Quill, sometimes playing Hiram in certain matchups isn't strong enough. You get to draw 2 cards, but you're going to lose that pressure on the board. Having Pluto as a second backup and being able to swing for 5 and also live for 5 health is really, really cracked. He can trade in with Maui, which is to me insane. Not even a Tinkerbell can do that. And again, with that 5 stat line, he can knock out daisies, sisus, pretty much anything on the board, and he'll even trade into Madam Min foxes. And against Ruby Amethyst, they have a problem with bodyguards. I think Pluto is an awesome card also with the 4 ink, being able to play it after using a whole new world. After realizing that, I was like, wait a minute, Pluto isn't really replacing Chempo. Pluto is just fitting in that 4 drop slot that we had. This is definitely a card that you can take out, but I definitely recommend testing it. I wish I could run this card at 4, and I hope I can. I'm gonna keep testing with this card, but so far in testing, it's just super strong. It also fights location super well. In my testing against Ruby Amethyst or even that new location burn deck, as soon as you put Pluto out and you pair it with a Smee or a Jim Hawkins, your opponent is just not gonna play locations. Again, I can't emphasize enough how strong a 5/5 stat line is. And that's already the second card that Sapphire Steel has gotten that I've shown in my list so far that has that aggressive, strong attack that was missing from last set. I think now that we have cards that can fight the board early and are really good, we should be playing them. So definitely test Pluto out. I can't wait to see if this card ends up staying in the list. Now for our 5 drops, I have good old Cogsworth. As you can see, I'm only playing 3 compared to 4. 4 Cogsworth was always mandatory in past sets, but so far in testing, because of this new 5 drop that I'm about to show you guys, it felt okay putting Cogsworth at 3, just because you're still going to see him when you have to, and you honestly don't want to see him in your opening hand, since all the drawing that you have, you'll end up seeing him when you have to. But the main reason why we're playing 3 is because of the brand new Shift Jim Hawkins. Since we're playing Whole New World, we do want a good amount of 5 drops just to sing on curve. I think 6 and 7 is a soft spot, and I really like this balance of having 3/3. But what this Jim Hawkins does is it's an uninkable. He is a 5/5 stat line, and he quests for 2. And his effect is he can shift for 3 on top of any Jim Hawkins, and on play, he can deal 1 damage to any location or character. Now, again, back to being able to fight the board early on. What Robin Hood shift line did for us wasn't enough. Being a 3 attacker just didn't get rid of daisies or sisus, and he would just get Medusa. Now we have a 5/5 hitter. Not only does he quest for 2, but if you pair him with Baby Jim's effect with the on challenger, he can actually keep it. So if you ink that turn and you shift onto Jim Hawkins, he can keep the +2 challenger from Small Jim, meaning he could potentially come out and swing for 7 or 9. And then you pair that with the 1 ping that he does 10 damage on play. So he can not only one-shot locations, one-shot any bodyguard, he can pretty much one-shot anything in the game. This card is insane. Even if you sing Whole New World on turn 3 with Jim Hawkins, he's going to survive any trade. They're going to have to 2-for-1 him. And if they 2-for-1 him, your opponent has no board. You can just slap down the Pluto, do your ramp, and you're fine. But not only can he sing Whole New World, he can sing cards like Swords. And honestly, this is such a strong card in testing. This has helped me win against so many Ruby decks, Steel Song decks. I'm not afraid of going against 2-3 Daisies openings or Sisus. You can pretty much play any card that you want. I know that I have a potential 7 attacker coming out on board. And this 1 ping effect comes up so much to get rid of pesky cards like evasives, or just again having that 1 ping damage opens up so many different lines that I didn't even think were possible with the deck when you pair it with cards like Tinkerbell and Grab Your Swords. This is going to be the 3rd card in the deck that we got that's brand new. Again, that can be implemented to fight that early aggression. Such an awesome early defense. And honestly, this card is what makes Sapphire and Steel probably tier 1 this set. I do want to add this super important line of play, and this helps emphasize why I think the gym package is super strong. Just because one of our hard matchups, which is Ruby Sapphire, we had a very hard time dealing with Hiram when they played it. Tinkerbell didn't even finish it off. Now, if they have a Hiram exerted and you have a small gym, if you ink once and then shift into gym, you can knock out a Hiram, or not even that. Jim Hawkins on play effect gets to deal 1 damage or something, so you can ping Hiram for 1 and swing over for 5. Honestly, that's just super crazy, and that's going to help our Ruby Sapphire matchup a lot. For our 6 drops, we still have the good old Tinkerbell that can't seem to leave the deck. A lot of aggro still going around. Tinkerbell, just such a strong card. Quest for 2, able to deal 1 damage to everything on the board when it's on play, and then when she destroys something in battle, she gets to deal 2 damage to something else. When you pair this card with Jim Hawkins, so for example, you can shift into Jim and then build up into a Tinkerbell. Once you have these 2 cards out, pairing that with Sword, you can pretty much board wipe anything. This cards right here have combo to get rid of the new Evasive Genie. I know a lot of people are having problems with that. Me personally, I'm not having problems with that. These 2 cards here are just ultimate board control, such strong stat lines. And again, Jim Hawkins being able to survive Maui's compared to what Tinkerbell couldn't, it's just crazy to me. And of course, to finish off our 6 drop, we're playing 2 Aerial. 2 Aerial. So I was on 3 last set. Right now I'm on 2 just because unfortunately Jim Hawkins, the big one, is uninkable. So we had to mess with the uninkable account. Ariel's still really fine at 2 since you don't want to see her early at all, and eventually you will see her late game. Her ward effect and then being able to quest for 5 is just going to be so crucial in your Ruby Sapphire matchups or even in your Ruby Amethyst. And not only that, but the thing about Sapphire and Steel is sometimes it plays catch up and you have to control the board. And once you stabilize, your opponent might be at a very high lore count and you need to close the game out fast. Ariel will do that for you. Your opponent just knows that once Ariel comes out, they have only 2-3 turns to win the game. This is a card where you can run 3 of if you want to. Me personally, at 2, I've been having enough success with it. For our last character, it's going to finish off with 2 Tamatoa, 2 Big Crabs. Why 2 Big Crabs? Why aren't we playing 4? How come we're not playing 3? Well, honestly, again, this is going to be another card that you can play more copies of. In testing so far, I just feel like with the new early board aggro or attacks that we have, we've been able to stabilize a lot more earlier, and the games don't really go out that long. Tamatoa is still too good of a card not to run, again, to close out your Sapphire, Ruby, or Ruby Amethyst matchups. Against other decks like Steel Song, Green Steel, they don't really come out at all just because you're fighting the board. So I just haven't seen enough reason to play for Tamatoa. You could if you want to, but for the space and other cards that are running in the deck, I think 2 is just fine. Now for the action cards, we're playing a favorite, Fire the Cannons. So Fire the Cannons has pretty much been in Sapphire Steel a staple ever since like pretty much set 1. And the ratio has always changed from 1 Fire the Cannons to 2 Fire the Cannons. But now we're actually seeing 3 Fire the Cannons in a lot of Sapphire and Steel lists. Reason being is because it's the best turn 1 play that we have on the draw as far as defense goes. So we can stop shift lines and destroy, any pretty much aggro decks with this. And when you pair this card with Jim Hawkins, Tinkerbell, you can pretty much kill a lot of things in the game. Having that 2 damage removal seems pretty weak, but again, when you pair it with Jim Hawkins, Tinkerbell, Swords, you can pretty much get rid of anything on the board. But the main reason why we're playing 3 is because of this new card, which is going to be Sell the Azurite Sea. So Sell the Azurite Sea is a 2-drop. It's going to be our new ramp. And what this card is it costs 2. And when you play it, you get to draw a card and then put an additional card in your inkwell. Meaning you can play this card for 2 at 2 ink, draw a card, you can ink. That ink does not come in exerted. You can use that ink, and with that leftover 1 ink, you can play Fire the Cannons. So that means on the draw against decks like Green Steel, you can kill their Diablo and still ramp. That's crazy value. And again, when you're pairing this card with the new 2-drop Jim Hawkins, you want to see this card early. That way your Jim Hawkins can swing for 2 or for 4. Next, for my favorite card in the deck, which honestly I think is the best card in the deck, is going to be 4 Visions of the Future. Now, Visions of the Future is a 2-cost inkable that lets you look at the top 5 cards of your deck and you get to add one to your hand. I can't stress enough how important this card is and why it's so important in the New World builds is because when you're setting up early board now, you might be inking your hand to get off those gym effects, and you really just need to see Whole New World and Hiram after you stabilize. And I don't want to just depend on drawing those cards exactly. Being able to look at the top 5 through visions and cycling through your deck to find the answer that you need is so important to me. And it keeps the gas going, right? I've always said this in my past Sapphire and Steel deck builds about keeping the gas going. Sapphire and Steel New World is a deck where you need to be able to ramp, put pressure out, refill, and do it again. If you don't see your draw engines, your deck's gonna fall behind and you're gonna lose the game. I really like how Visions can find you Hiram, can find you New World, and not only that, but when you shift on turn 3 with Jim and the following turn you're on turn 4, you can play Visions and be able to find New World, find swords, and sing. The reason being is because maybe against Emerald Steel, you're not keeping those songs in your opening play, and because they're uninkables, you're putting those cards back in your deck. Visions will find you that card. Also, for late game pieces to find your aerials, find your dimes. Honestly, Visions is such a strong card. You could play it at 3 if you wanted to, but every time I do that, I regret it, and I love 4 just because again, it's also part of your draw engine. I feel like, and it can just find you your missing pieces exactly when you need them. We're playing 2 Let It Go for removal. I think Let It Go is just super strong effect. You can pretty much answer anything on the board, and even cards like Mufasa, they don't get to activate their effects because they go straight into the inkwell. I'm personally more of a fan of Hades though, just because Hades is a body and Let It Go is an action song, so it can be sniped by Baby Ursula. But we're playing Let It Go because we're playing the new Jim Hawkins and the uninkable account. Well, Hades just didn't make the cut, so we had to play Let It Go. Honestly, Let It Go is still such a strong card since again this is a New World deck and we're singing with our 5/6 drops. I Let It Go with the Jim Hawkins turn 3, turn 4 just to answer anything is pretty strong. And again, for those Sapphire Ruby matchups to answer those Tamatoas, to answer those Hirams, Let It Go such a strong card because it can answer everything in the game. To end off our removal, we're playing 3 Grab Your Swords. Grab Your Sword does 2 damage to everything on the board when it's sang or played. And honestly, it's just a very strong song that we play in New World lists just because we get to sing it. And when you pair that card with Jim Hawkins, Tinkerbell, you can pretty much board wipe a lot of things. And the damage is just crazy. And until a better card comes out, Grab Your Swords is not getting replaced. It's been a staple in all New Worlds lists. I know some people might be cutting it to 2 to add some other cards that came out this set, but that didn't work for me. Grab Your Swords is insane, and finding it with Visions when you need it is cracked. We're playing 3 Whole New World. You can play 4 Whole New Worlds if you want, but since I'm playing 4 Visions, I'm able to find Whole New World when I need to. I hate opening up with a Whole New World in my hand just because it's such a dead card, and I do not want to see it against Emerald Steel. Again, you can play 4 if you want to, but I think 3 Whole New Worlds with 4 Visions is perfectly fine. And with the new early game pressure that we have in the deck, we can fight the board off, so sometimes you don't even need to Whole New World, and you can just win the game off with Hiram. Can't forget about our items. We're still playing 4 Popsicle, 4 Fortisphere, 3 Fishbone, 4 Fishbone, I mean, and 2 Lucky Dime. These items are going to be core staples. It's for your Hiram package. Fishbone is just the best ramp card in the deck. And you still need Lucky Dime just to close out games against Ruby Sapphire, Ruby Amethyst. Against Amber Steel, Emerald Steel, you're usually inking this card with Fishbone Quill. But sometimes you'd be surprised if you have an Aerial on board and you have a Visions and you're not even looking to play Dime. But when you activate Visions and you see the Dime, you realize that you can close the game out really fast. Lucky Dime, just a strong card. Your opponent's unable to interact with it on your turn, so it's too good not to run. I'm going to have my Dreamborn link in the description, so just in case I update this deck list throughout the season, you can always go to my Dreamborn and check out my other decks, not only this one, and see what updates I've made. Alright, now to go over the flex spots in the deck, you can mess around with your ratios if you like, just so you can add in other cards that you want to test out. So one being is you can take out 1 small gym and 1 big gym, just in case if you're not seeing the shift line consistent enough and you think you need other cards that can be stronger in those lines, you can take out 2 of these. The deck can still work pretty fine. 2 Visions of the Future as well. I know a lot of people don't like Visions of the Future. I personally just can't see myself going down more than 4, but taking out 2 without messing up the consistency of the deck should be fine. You can take out 1, sell the Azurite Sea as well. I know a lot of people are on 7 ramp options. I just think this card, since we're playing the small gym, you want to see it at 4. But if you mess around with the small gym ratio, then you're fine taking out 1, sell the Azurite Sea. The last flex spot in the deck is going to be Pluto. I know a lot of people have told me, is Pluto worth running or not? Again, this is a card that you really have to test consistently enough to see how much that 5/5 stand line comes up. But if you want to cut the Pluto, you can cut it. The deck will still work perfectly fine. It's just a card that I personally find really strong. I think these are going to be the 7 best cards that can work with your flex spots. So if you wanted to add in any of the cards that I showcased earlier in replace of those, the deck can still work perfectly fine. Now, I just want to go over what cards you could run more of if you wanted to. That's going to be Whole New World. If you want to run 4 copies, that's fine. I know a lot of people are on 4 Whole New World, so that's one card that you can add more of, and the deck will work probably even better for you. You can add in another copy of Tamatoa, another copy of Ariel, just in case you want to see more of those checkmate end game win condition pieces. I know a lot of people are on more Tamatoas, but I think me personally, 2 is just fine. And the only other card that is worth it if you want to run more copies of is going to be the Cogsworth if you want to go back up to 4. Just again to counter that Emerald Steel, Steel Song decks. Pretty much against anything Steel, Cogsworth is the way to go. And that pretty much sums up the deck profile. Now we can go ahead and dive into Mulligans. So for the Mulligan, these are the cards that you're going to want to see in your opening hand. I'll break it down for you real quick. You want to see your Popsicle always as a 1-drop play. And if you're on the draw, you want to open up with Fire the Cannons. But for the most part, you want to have the Popsicle just because if you open up your ramp, which is going to be Sail of the Azurite Sea on turn 2, you can always play a Hiram on turn 4. And that also unlocks a different turn 4 play where you can use Pluto. So that combination right there gives you that chance of either playing Pluto or Hiram. Pluto is going to fall more of a defensive line or offense to go against any Ruby decks, or if you need to get rid of any early threats. And then Hiram is going to be more for a slow place matchup, so you can go with those 2 different lines. And then to go back to your 2-drop, just in case you don't have your ramp, you want to see a form of defense, which is either going to be from the Smee or the small Jim Hawkins. That way you can fight and contest the board early on and not get fall behind in lore and get overwhelmed by threats. And after that, you really just want to see cards that are going to be beneficial for you after you set up your first 3 turns, which are going to be either the Quill or your Visions of the Future paired with, for example, Big Jim Hawkins, right? You're looking for a play that you're going to do after you've already set up. Visions of the Future is going to help you find either a whole new world or your Hiram, just in case you didn't see Hiram, or just pretty much to continue on your game plan with the board. And then something like Jim Hawkins is going to be for when you're really trying to control the board state and already have a singer on board. These are the main cards that you want to see in your opening hand. If you notice, they're pretty much all inkable outside of the Fire, the Cannons, and Jim Hawkins, just because those are going to be your best cards to set up and stabilize the first 3 turns. It's a combination of offense with the Smee, Jim Hawkins, and Pluto. You still have your draw engine with the Visions of the Future, Hiram, and Popsicle. And then for your ramping, you have the Fishbone Quill and Azurite Sea. And then just to solidify your board state, you can even play Pluto after you have all your guys out, or you can go into a Jim Hawkins. And then from there, you want to play Whole New World into Tinkerbell and end the game out with Ariel or Tamatoa. And throughout those turns, you have all your removal just to fight back the board. Twinfire. Twinfire is a brand new set 6 card. It's a 2-drop uninkable action card, and this lets you deal 2 damage to anything on board, and you get to discard a card in your hand to deal another 2 damage, but it has to be a different target. I think this card's really good. It's kind of like another Fire of the Cannons in a way, a little bit better. And scenarios that I see this useful is against Emerald Steel to get rid of a Morph, get rid of a Diablo, even against Steel Song to get rid of, or not even get rid of, it can deal 2 damage to Daisy, finish it off with Smee, and deal another 2 damage maybe to a Baby Cinderella. Super good against anti-aggro, just to being able to get rid of small bodies on the board. Even against Ruby Amethyst, it's potentially strong for Flynn's and their 1-drops, because sometimes they leave them on board just to quest out against you, because they know you're not going to trade your Smee into that. I don't like that you have to discard a card in your hand, but I do see a lot of potential in this card. So if you did want to run this card, you honestly go for it. You can play 1 Develop Your Brain, just because sometimes you miss your 1-drop items, and that can hurt you a lot. So if you did want to see more 1-drop consistency, Develop Your Brain. I prefer over Captain Hook just because Develop Your Brain lets you dig, and that's what the deck needs, a little bit more consistency. This card is awesome just to run an extra 1 or 2, again, if you want to have more 1-drop plays. Along Came Zeus. Along Came Zeus pairs really well with Hiram, and now that we're playing Pluto, so if you did want more removal, Along the Came Zeus is such a good card, being able to pretty much answer almost everything in the game. You can also get rid of that new evasive Maui that Ruby decks are playing because it has evasive, or even again that new Genie as well with evasive. Zeus gets to answer everything, fight locations. The only reason why I'm not running it is again because the uninkable space. Arthur's a 7-drop uninkable. He lets you attack anything that's ready. So that means you can counter ward very easily with Arthur, and he gives +2 challengers. So if you play this with Tinkerbell, Jim Hawkins, they can pretty much kill anything on the board. I think Arthur is a very strong card. Again, uninkable space is tight. That's why he didn't make the cut. Hideaway is just, I think, the best answer to item or location removal that Sapphire Steel can have. So if you have a lot of trouble with locations or mirror matches with Lucky Dimes, Hideaway is your go-to location removal. If I see a lot of item decks going around with Lucky Dime or a lot of location burn decks, Hideaway might make the cut. I love Hades. I prefer Hades over Let It Go. So if you do mess with your uninkable count and make less uninkables, or for whatever reason you cut that amount, I would definitely replace the Let It Go with Hades just to counter also Pete. You don't want your opponent to have a board, they play Pete, and you can't answer that. Hades can bypass that and pretty much answer anything on the board. Yeah, Hades, a super strong card, just didn't make the cut because it's uninkable. 7-drop Simba, I think is still good with the stat line 5/7. He can quest for 2, and then on play, he can either deal 2 damage to a character on board or draw you 2 cards, making you also discard. Now with Jim Hawkins, I feel like that stat line for that cost is not worth it. We can just have a strong character come out way earlier. But I think Simba, if you want to play as a one of, just to also counter Emerald Steel, if you have a lot of that in your meta, Simba is just a very good card. O is going to be that other 5-drop, just in case you don't like Jim Hawkins or you don't like the Pluto and you miss having that 5-drop that can sing Whole New World with that stat line. Chempo is going to be the card for you. Again, I just don't think Chempo makes the cut because Jim Hawkins is taking that slot. Pluto does not. I'm not replacing Chempo with Pluto because of the bodyguard. Again, Pluto is for that 4-drop slot. Jim Hawkins is going to be the one taking up that 5-drop slot. But if you did miss that Chempo, you can go ahead and add him right back in. He fits in the deck perfectly well. For some other location removal, I think Billy Bones is really strong. Just in case you didn't want to play Pluto and you didn't want to add Hideaway, I think Billy Bones is a really strong card that's set in set 6 that Sapphire and Steel got, because he can quest for 2, and when he is banished, you can banish a chosen opponent's item or location. So he's pretty much good into everything outside of maybe like Steel Song, Emerald Steel. So you can put him out against Ruby Sapphire, get some early lore, and if they answer him, you can destroy a pop or a popsicle or a fishbone quill, and then against Ruby decks, you can answer other locations. We have Gantu, another set 6 card that came out. Gantu is a vanilla 5-drop with stat lines 4/3, and they can quest for 4. The only reason why you would want to play this card is because of his questing ability. If you pair this card with your other bodyguard cards in your Sapphire and Steel deck, he's a nice way to pretty much close out games. He's another win condition, and if you pair this card with Pete for 8 ink instead of playing Tamatoa, that's also pretty cracked. I personally just don't like that he's a vanilla, but I can definitely see some lists cutting the Tamatoa and going more for Gantu, just to being able to use Pete and Gantu way sooner. Smash is going to be another removal that's super strong, can pretty much answer 2/3 singing Ursula, can answer Evasive Genie pairing it with Tinkerbell or Jim Hawkins. It can answer Aerials. Smash is such a strong card, also pretty useful in to get rid of Diablos. I just think, again, with the Jim Hawkins that we have, it balances out that damage we were missing. But if you want to play Smash, I think Smash is such a strong card. It can definitely make the cut. We're not playing Tipo anymore just because we have an awesome new 2-drop ramp that I think is just way better. The thing about Tipo is that Tipo can ink an uninkable card. You just can't use that ink that you gain from Tipo. If you didn't want to run Cell, I think Tipo is fine. I don't think Detective Mickey makes the cut anymore. Being able to ink an uninkable card is super strong. If you didn't want to play Cell, Tipo would be your other ramp card that you'd have to fall back to. If you want to play Magic Broom over Smee, it's such a good call just because Magic Broom can answer anything evasive. Magic Broom is a 2-drop, stat lines 2/3, and during your turn he gains evasive, so he can contest Diablos. I know there's a lot of new evasives going around in the meta, so Magic Broom is such a strong card to counter that. He personally didn't make the cut for me just because I feel like we have other better answers to answer evasives. But if you do see a lot of evasives in your meta, Magic Broom is definitely the way to go. You can cut the Smees and put Magic Broom, or you can actually even cut one Gym and one Smee and add in 2 Brooms if you want to run all 3. But for evasive early threats, Magic Broom would be your best bet. And for the last card is going to be Baboom. Baboom Kind of like Fire the Cannons and Twin Fire, it can deal 2 damage to anything on the board. The thing is, it's inkable. So if you want to mess with your uninkable count, you can play Baboom, and that way you can play other uninkables that are pretty good. I just don't think Baboon fits well into our deck just because we're playing the new Sell the Azurite Sea card. So that one additional ink that we can use for the turn, Fire the Cannons just pairs really well with it. That's it for the deck profile, deck guide. I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. I appreciate everyone who gave me a lot of positive feedback in the set 5 Sapphire and Steel deck guide that I have. I think this deck is super strong. If you want to get into Sapphire and Steel and you haven't played it before, this is a really good way to start. I appreciate you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace out.